Imagine a world where no contract holds any real power. A world where justice bends to the whims of the powerful, where your most basic rights exist only on paper, if they exist at all. Sound like a dystopian nightmare? This was reality for most of human history. Every time you sign a contract, take someone to court, or stand up for your rights, you're actually reaching back through time, wielding legal principles forged over 2,000 years ago. Think about that for a moment. The foundations of justice you rely on today were laid by men wearing togas, writing by candlelight in ancient Rome. Welcome to Imperium Chronicles. Today we're embarking on an epic journey through time to discover how Rome built something far more lasting than its mighty armies or marble monuments. The legal system that still governs our lives today. This is the story of how a small city on 7 hills became the mother of all Western law. You'll meet brilliant legal minds who shaped civilization itself. There's Gaius, whose legal textbook was so perfect it was still being used to train lawyers 1,000 years after his death. You'll discover how Emperor Justinian gathered the finest legal scholars in the empire for an impossible task, turning 1,000 years of scattered laws into one perfect code. And you'll see how their work echoes through every courtroom and contract in the modern world. But here's what makes this story truly fascinating. These ancient Romans were solving the exact same problems we face today. How do we ensure justice for all? What makes a contract fair? When should the state step in to protect individual rights? Their answers would shape human civilization for the next 2 millennia. The Roman Empire may have fallen, but its greatest creation, its legal system, never died. It lives on in every court case, every business deal, and every protection you enjoy as a citizen. Ready to discover how it all began? If you're passionate about history and want to understand how the past shaped our present, like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Imperium Chronicles. Let's begin this epic legal journey together and uncover how a civilization that mastered the art of law continues to rule from beyond the grave. Let me take you back to 753 years before Christ, to the early days of Rome when justice was, well, complicated is putting it mildly. Picture a society where the Patricians, the wealthy elite, kept the laws as closely guarded secrets, passing them down orally from father to son like precious family recipes. The common people, the plebeians, lived at the mercy of arbitrary decisions, never quite knowing what their rights were, or if they had any at all. But in 451 before Christ, something revolutionary happened. After years of social unrest, street protests, and what historians call the conflict of the orders, the Roman people had finally had enough. They demanded something unprecedented. They wanted the laws written down where everyone could see them. The result? The 12 Tables, Rome's first written code of law. Imagine the scene at the Roman Forum. Bronze plates gleaming in the Mediterranean sun, crowds gathering to read their rights for the very first time. This wasn't just a legal document, it was a revolution in bronze and letters. These tables covered everything from basic social rules to complex court procedures. One of the most famous laws stated simply, "The dead shall be buried or burned, and nothing more shall be done." Now, this might sound basic to our modern ears, but think about it. This single line established fundamental principles of public health and social organization that we still follow today. Here's a fascinating detail most history books won't tell you. Before the 12 Tables, if you couldn't pay your debts, your creditors could literally cut you into pieces. And they had to cut equal pieces, mind you. No creditor could take more than their fair share. The new law changed this to a more humane system of debt slavery, which, while still harsh by our standards, was a massive improvement. But perhaps the most incredible twist in this story comes centuries later. When Emperor Justinian created his famous legal code, he ordered all copies of the ancient laws, including the beloved 12 Tables, to be destroyed. His reasoning? He wanted to prevent legal confusion. Talk about a dramatic rewrite of legal history. The 12 Tables might be lost to time, but their legacy lives on. They established principles we still hold dear, that laws should be public, that they should apply equally to everyone, and that justice shouldn't be a secret kept by the powerful few. For the first time in Western history, the law became something you could point to, something you could read, something that belonged to everyone. And here's a thought that should blow your mind. Every time you see a public notice of a new law, every time you read your rights or sign a contract, you're participating in a tradition that began with those bronze tables in the Roman Forum 2,500 years ago. Now that's what I call standing the test of time. While Roman legions were conquering territories across 3 continents, another kind of conquest was taking place in the quiet studies and bustling forums of Rome. Here, brilliant minds were waging a different kind of battle. One fought not with swords, but with ideas that would shape civilization for the next 2,000 years. Meet Gaius, perhaps the most influential teacher of law who ever lived. In the 2nd century after Christ, this mysterious figure, we don't even know his full name, wrote a legal textbook called the Institutiones. Imagine writing something so perfect that law students would still be studying it 800 years later. Even more remarkable? We have no idea what Gaius looked like, where he came from, or even if he held any official position. Yet his clear, elegant explanations of complex legal principles became the foundation of legal education across Europe and beyond. Then there's Ulpian, whose words still echo in courtrooms today. Picture a man who could distill the essence of justice into a single, powerful phrase. Justice is the constant and perpetual desire to give to each man what he deserves. These weren't just pretty words. They were revolutionary ideas that suggested justice should be based on reason and fairness, not merely on power or tradition. But here's what made these Roman legal minds truly extraordinary. They weren't content just to preserve old laws. They were innovators, creators, architects of new legal concepts we still use today. They invented the idea of jurisprudence, where specific cases create precedents for future situations. Think about that. Every time a modern judge cites a previous case as precedent, they're using a tool invented by these ancient Roman lawyers. They also developed something truly revolutionary, the idea that intention matters more than the literal meaning of words. In an age when most legal systems were rigid and literal, these Romans understood that justice needed to be flexible and consider human nature. And then there's Paul of Tarsus, who gave us one of the most fundamental principles of modern justice. Dolus non praesumitur. Evil intent must not be presumed. In other words, innocent until proven guilty. Yes, that cornerstone of modern justice systems worldwide came from a Roman jurist. Every time you hear about someone being presumed innocent in court, you're hearing an echo from ancient Rome. Here's a fascinating detail most people don't know. These jurists often disagreed with each other, and their debates were collected and studied as much as their agreements. They understood that the law isn't about finding perfect answers, but about reasoning through difficult questions with wisdom and fairness. These men never led armies or ruled empires, but their ideas conquered more territory than any Roman legion. Their true genius wasn't just in writing laws, it was in understanding human nature and creating legal principles flexible enough to survive for thousands of years. While Rome's armies turned to dust, these invisible architects built something that still stands today, the very foundation of Western law. Let me take you to Constantinople. 527 years after Christ. The morning sun rises over the greatest city in the world as Justinian I takes the Byzantine throne. But this emperor has something far more ambitious in mind than just ruling an empire. He wants to create the most comprehensive legal code in human history. Imagine the challenge. 1,000 years of Roman laws scattered across countless scrolls, many contradicting each other, some existing only in fragments, others lost to time. Some laws dated back to the time of Caesar, others to Augustus, and many had become hopelessly outdated. It was legal chaos. Here's what made this task even more fascinating. Justinian himself had never set foot in a courtroom as a judge or lawyer. Yet this former peasant boy from the Balkans, who rose to become emperor through sheer determination, understood something profound. An empire needs more than just armies. It needs laws that make sense. So Justinian gathered the finest legal minds in the empire, led by the brilliant Tribonian. Picture the scene. Dozens of scholars working day and night in the imperial library, surrounded by thousands of scrolls, debating every word, every principle, every law. Their mission? Turn this legal maze into a masterpiece of clarity and reason. The result was the Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law. But this wasn't just any legal code. It was more like a legal library divided into 4 amazing books. First, the Codex. Imagine the greatest hits of imperial laws, carefully selected and organized. Then, the Digest, or Pandects. Think of it as the wisdom of the greatest Roman lawyers distilled into 50 books. The Institutes came next, a textbook so perfect that law students would use it for the next 1,000 years. Finally, the novels, Justinian's own new laws, addressing the problems of his day. Want to hear something incredible? The team completed the first version of this massive project in just 4 years. But here's the twist. Justinian wasn't satisfied. He ordered a second edition, even more comprehensive than the first. Talk about a perfectionist. But perhaps the most dramatic part of this story is what Justinian did next. To prevent confusion, he ordered all older legal texts to be destroyed. Yes, you heard that right. He literally erased centuries of legal history to ensure his code would be the definitive version. It was like hitting the reset button on 1,000 years of legal development. The irony? This code, created in Constantinople, would later help Western Europe rediscover its own Roman legal heritage during the Middle Ages. When scholars found copies of Justinian's work centuries later, it sparked a legal renaissance that shaped modern European law. Think about it. An emperor who never practiced law created the most influential legal code in history, one that would shape legal systems from France to Japan. Today, whenever you sign a contract, buy property, or go to court, you're experiencing the legacy of Justinian's grand vision. Ready for another fascinating twist in our story? As we wrap up this segment, remember that even though Rome's empire eventually fell, Justinian's legal revolution lives on in courtrooms and law schools worldwide. The empire struck back, not with swords, but with laws that conquered time itself. What makes Roman law truly extraordinary isn't just its specific rules or regulations. The real magic lies in the fundamental principles they created, principles so powerful that they continue to shape our courts and legal systems today. Think about this. Every time you sign a contract, whether it's for a new phone, a house, or even ordering pizza online, you're participating in a tradition that goes back 2,000 years. The Romans gave us pacta sunt servanda. Agreements must be kept. This wasn't just a suggestion. It was the bedrock of their entire commercial system. In a world where verbal agreements were common, the Romans understood that society needs trust to function. Here's a fascinating detail. Roman merchants would break a clay tablet in 2 when making a contract. Each party kept one half, and when brought together they had to match perfectly. An ancient version of our modern contract verification. But perhaps their most revolutionary principle was audiatur et altera par. Let the other side be heard. In ancient times, when most civilizations practiced swift and often arbitrary justice, the Romans insisted that every party deserved their day in court. This principle was so important that even slaves had the right to be heard in certain legal matters, something unthinkable in most ancient societies. The Romans went even further with jus gentium, the law of peoples. Imagine governing an empire stretching from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. How do you create laws that work for everyone? The Romans found a solution. They identified universal principles of justice that transcended cultural boundaries. This was nothing short of revolutionary, the first draft of universal human rights 2 millennia before the United Nations. A lesser-known fact, Roman judges would often travel to different provinces, adapting local customs into their legal framework. They weren't just imposing Roman law. They were creating a living, breathing legal system that could evolve and adapt. The Romans also gave us another brilliant innovation, the distinction between public and private law. Public law governed relationships involving the state, while private law regulated relationships between citizens. This separation might seem obvious today, but it was a groundbreaking concept in the ancient world. It meant that personal disputes wouldn't get tangled up with state affairs, and government powers had clear limitations. Let me share something remarkable. When Roman officials entered a courtroom, they had to leave their symbols of power outside. Justice was supposed to be blind to status and rank, a principle we still strive for today. These Roman principles weren't just clever ideas, they were tested and refined through centuries of practical application. They survived the fall of Rome, the Dark Ages, and the Renaissance. They've been translated into countless languages and adapted by legal systems worldwide. Why? Because they speak to something fundamentally human, our innate sense of justice and fairness. The next time you hear someone say, "Let's hear both sides of the story," or "A deal is a deal," remember, you're echoing principles that helped build civilization itself. The Romans may be gone, but their quest for justice continues through us every single day. Here's the true miracle of history. While Rome's military might crumbled, its greatest creation was quietly conquering the entire world. The empire might have fallen, but its laws marched on. Picture this: Europe in the Dark Ages. While barbarian kingdoms fought for territory, something remarkable was happening in quiet monastery scriptoriums. Monks were carefully copying the Corpus, Juris, Civilis, Justinian's magnificent legal code, word by word. These dedicated scholars, working by candlelight, weren't just preserving words on parchment. They were saving civilization itself. Did you know that many of these monks didn't even understand Latin perfectly? Yet they copied every letter with incredible precision, believing this knowledge was too precious to lose. Some manuscripts took years to complete, with monks working in shifts to ensure accuracy. Then something extraordinary happened. As Europe slowly emerged from the Dark Ages, the first universities were born. And guess what they were studying? Roman law. Bologna, the oldest university in the world, began as a school of Roman legal studies in the year 1088. Paris followed, then Oxford. Students would travel thousands of miles just to study these ancient legal principles. Here's a fascinating detail. Medieval students would often memorize entire sections of Roman law by setting them to music. Some of these legal songs survived well into the 18th century. Fast forward to Napoleon Bonaparte. After conquering much of Europe, he realized that military victories weren't enough. "My true glory," he declared, "is not the 40 battles I won. What will live forever is my civil code." And what was this code based on? You guessed it, Roman legal principles. Napoleon's legal team spent countless hours studying ancient Roman texts to create their modern masterpiece. But the story doesn't end in Europe. As European powers expanded their influence, Roman legal principles traveled to the farthest corners of the earth. Today, if you live in Brazil, France, Germany, Japan, or dozens of other countries, you're living under a legal system that draws directly from Roman sources. Think about it. Every time you buy property, sign a contract, or go to court, you're participating in a legal tradition that began in ancient Rome. Your property rights? Roman. Your contract protections? Roman. Your right to a fair trial? You guessed it, Roman. Let me share something incredible. Even countries that were never part of the Roman Empire, like Japan, voluntarily adopted Roman legal principles in the 19th century. They recognized that these ancient laws had universal value. The influence goes even deeper than you might think. When you hear phrases like "the burden of proof" or "innocent until proven guilty," you're quoting concepts developed by Roman legal minds 2,000 years ago. They've become so fundamental to our understanding of justice that we rarely stop to consider their origin. So next time you see a judge's gavel or a courthouse column, remember, these aren't just symbols of justice. They're echoes of an empire that never truly fell. Rome's greatest conquest wasn't won by legions and swords, but by the enduring power of its ideas about justice and law. While Rome's eagles no longer fly over world capitals, its legal principles continue to govern billions of lives. Now that's what I call an empire that never died. Rome taught us something profound. True civilization isn't measured by the strength of swords, but by the wisdom of laws. It's remarkable to think that 2,000 years later, we still turn to principles created by jurists who could never have imagined smartphones, internet, or modern democracies. Yet their ideas work just as well today as they did in ancient times. That's the power of truly universal thinking. You know what's fascinating? Every time you demand justice, sign a contract, or defend yourself in court, you're not just following procedures, you're participating in a conversation that began millennia ago in the streets of Rome. When a judge bangs their gavel today, they're echoing a tradition that started when Romans would strike their staff against the ground to begin legal proceedings. Think about it. Roman judges never dreamed of DNA evidence or digital contracts, yet the principles they established still guide us through these modern innovations. They couldn't foresee our world, but they understood human nature so well that their solutions still work. The history of Rome shows us something remarkable. Humanity's greatest achievements aren't territories conquered or treasures accumulated. They're ideas that stand the test of time. While Rome's armies conquered bodies, its laws conquered minds, and they're still conquering hearts and minds today. Here's a thought that always amazes me. The same legal principles that governed trade in the Roman Forum now regulate transactions on the internet. The same concepts of justice that protected Roman citizens now safeguard our rights in the digital age. Some ideas truly are eternal. Now, if this journey through Roman legal history has made you think differently about how the past shapes our present, take a moment to like this video and share this incredible story with others. Subscribe to Imperium Chronicles for more fascinating tales about how Rome shaped our world. And here's something I'm really curious about. What aspect of Roman law surprised you the most? Was it how they handled contracts, their influence on modern courts, or perhaps how their ideas spread across the globe? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't miss our upcoming videos. We have many more epic stories to tell about how Rome molded the world we live in. Next week, we'll explore Rome's incredible engineering feats and how they revolutionized architecture forever. Before we part ways, remember this: history never died. It was just waiting for you to discover it. The Romans weren't just building an empire, they were creating a legacy that would echo through the ages. And you're part of that legacy every time you exercise your legal rights. Until next time, fellow history enthusiasts. As the Romans would say, veil, farewell. And remember, somewhere in that law book on your shelf or that contract on your phone, a piece of ancient Rome lives on, still shaping our world, still fighting for justice, still teaching us about the power of ideas that truly stand the test of time. This is Imperium Chronicles, where history comes alive and the past never stops surprising us. See you in our next adventure through time.